Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to episode 75 of The Normal Blokes, a podcast dedicated to improving the competitive 40k experience. Tonight, I'm joined by my co-host Luke.
Hey, how we doing?
And Josh.
How we doing, guys?
And Eric.
G'day, gentlemen.
So tonight, we're going to be having a chat about one of the upcoming events in Brisbane in Queensland, Australia, the Art of War Gladiator team event, which will be held here in Brizzy. It's going to be hosted by Josh and Eric. They're going to have a bit of a chat about that later. And we're going to have a bit of a chat about the overall format of teams events and how bloody awesome they are. How are we all doing tonight, guys?
Yeah, good.
Very good.
Tired. Thanks, mate.
Apart from the crushing fatigue of actually having to work for a living, we've all obviously been busy with our hobby, and I'm really excited tonight to be chatting also, especially with Josh, who's just started launching his new brand. He'll be running a whole bunch of tournaments here in Brisbane and has a couple of pretty awesome things to chat with us about. So take it away, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So as Liam mentioned, I've basically rebranded it myself. I used to run a lot of fringe events, sort of fill in and around. I've always run masters, unless I didn't and someone else took it off me. But essentially, I've just sort of amalgamated it into a bit more organisational. So it mainly will kick off in 2021. So if your listeners are big fans of Down Under Pairings, pretty much all my events for the rest of the year are already listed on that. I'm going to be staggering the registrations for them, probably about 3 months in advance. But it just gives you a good sort of a planning tool to sort of map out your events. You guys are actually coming on board as well as another partnership with me as well. So you guys are going to run a few GTs independently. Like when we talk independently, we mean not in a store or whatnot. It's a private venue and usually a lot bigger. So that's where we can get anywhere from 50 to 80 odd players at these single events or team events. So... But yeah, so essentially I've been working with a lot of gaming clubs to sort of bring them out and get events happening in a large scale.
And I think one of the things that's going to be clear to anyone who's played events in Brisbane is that Josh McGowan has been essentially an invaluable resource to Queensland tournaments, not just in organising and running them and trying to keep a level of decorum going in the events, but also the terrain. I mean, very few independent people are able to put a whole tournament together based on their own personal terrain. And I know from running the GT for the Normal Blokes earlier this year with Luke, Denise and Jordan, that terrain essentially allowed us to get off the ground. So we're very, very happy to be partnering with Josh because it means obviously that we can run those events, but also means those events continue to support Josh's kitty to keep growing that terrain and keep growing tournaments in Brisbane. It's going to be awesome. Yeah,
that's a good thing about it. Like, anyone who's ever bought and built a table before knows how expensive it is, and then you go times it by 40, and it's just like it just doesn't happen. You don't,
you can keep that building all to yourself, eh?
Yeah. So, and it's not only that; it's like it's the storing as well. So it's like,
and then try and buy an AdMech army on top of it, Josh.
Pretty much. Buy any army on top of that.
Yeah,
even knights are getting expensive.
So, I mean, obviously, for anyone who goes on DUP now, you've put a whole bunch of dates in Down Under Pairings for events going forwards. But what does this mean, I guess, your brand, what do you think it means, I guess, for somebody who, obviously not present today, who maybe wants to run an event or other parties who want to get involved?
Oh, 100%. So basically what it is I'm basically umbrellaing myself to enable people to have the resources to run their events. So what it does is I can then go to stockists and suppliers, and I'm no longer just running 3 events and then helping 4 or 5 other people run their individual events. I just run 10. So, like for you guys, you basically come on as the TOs. You'll write the pack and do all that sort of stuff. And I essentially just make sure that I line up any sort of sponsors, venue hire, stuff like that. If it's not already sourced, insurances, because that's a thing. And all that sort of stuff. So I basically am using it to get a bulk deal run. The other exciting thing that I'm going to be doing as well is I'm going to be offering season passes. So everyone buys usually tickets individually, so they're about $50 a pop. I'm actually going to put out a season pass for $350 because like currently I've got 10 events on the calendar. So it means that you get each event for $35. I'm going to close that sale out at the end of January next year. So basically, if you're happy to basically infuse me with cash, you get a massive discount on your tournament run. The other reason why I'm looking to do season passes, the idea is that I'm trying to basically get guys, like most of us will go to 5 to 6 to 10 events a year anyway. What it does is I'm getting in line with, I want to run perpetual trophies to the end of it. So things that you wouldn't get normally at a single event just because the budget's too small. So things like, because of my brand being a Gladiator gaming, I'm going to actually do a proper Gladiator helmet, like a proper steel one that you would use in fighting. I'm going to do engraved swords and stuff like that. So I'm going to up the ante and use a kitty per se to basically get loyal guys that go to majority of my events to complete in their own little circuit, which will eventually mean that they're playing for something cool. Like back in the day, we used to get things like bolt guns and chainswords made up by members of the community and used to play in a number of events. So I'd like to basically nominate a few events, like obviously with you guys, Art of War, stuff like that. So guys running their independents, I'll earmark to the community which one of them is going to contribute to your overall score to win these big prizes. It basically just means that people will be more inclined to travel around and see different clubs and game in different areas, and maybe even start looking at some interstate as well. So, but yeah, it's just give you a little bit something extra. Like we all love tournaments, but it's just that little thing at the end of the year would be nice to award over something really cool for your hobby room and stuff like that.
And that season pass
And I mean,
really does a great job as well, because like if you're going to attend all those 10 events and you want to get in the running for these cool prizes to be involved as well, that season pass is really helpful. It's a cool idea.
And I think the ITC, I mean, in the States and here in Australia, sort of did that with the the ITC champion winning a big prize, and that definitely got some people enthused. Like some people were absolutely like fighting to death over that prize. And I know you don't really want that sort of level of potentially cutthroat stuff, but by the same token, you're going to have people who might not otherwise want to compete who come out and try to get that big prize, and I think it's an awesome idea.
Well, the funny thing is, like years ago when it actually happened, like it wasn't the people that were winning like tournaments first overall. It was consistency that actually won. So like you look at the guys who might come anywhere from top 1 through to 6 at just about every event. Those are the ones that, if they're consistent enough, will actually walk away with the big prizes. So, it's like it's an award inside of an award. Like you don't necessarily have to win events to win it. You just have to get the most amount of points consistently across all events.
That's fair. So, I mean, let me ask you this, Josh. If this is your sort of your first event you're running under this so-called title, why a teams event? Let's segue into talking about some teams events.
Because I love them. Team events, I think, is pretty much the future of 40K. Okay. Eric, myself, you, Luke even had a hand in it as well. Like we've been playing a lot of the state team championships, and also Eric's been overseas a couple of times as well. And I just think with the way that 40K is structured, team events just make a lot more sense. Like,
yeah, definitely. So Eric, as a lot of people may know, is a Australian ETC team member. He's travelled all over the world, along with Liam as well. Liam was a ETC team member. Now, these guys have travelled to, where was it last year? Serbia? Is that right?
Yeah.
This year, sorry. For those who don't really experience team events, what do you guys think? Like, why is a team event and travelling for so much more fun than an individual event?
You want to go first, Eric?
Yeah, sure. Man, to be honest, the best part of it is the camaraderie that you get out of a team rather than competing against all your best mates. Like getting together as a team, like all the prep before the event is probably just as enjoyable as actually playing on the day. Hanging out with the boys, going to dinner, all that sort of jazz, going through matchups together. The other thing is, like at a singles event, a lot of the time you're bound to run into a matchup your list just can't handle, or even if you end up landing on a crappy sort of table, that can kind of end your event there and then, like especially for a lot of the top guys who are there to try and win the event. that can be pretty disheartening. Whereas in teams, you've got more of a motivation to really push on in those hard games because you're really working for it, all your mates, not just yourself. And taking a small loss on the chin can actually be the difference between your team winning or losing a round. So losses aren't so much of a bad thing in a team. So I think that kind of gives people more of an opportunity to get closer to a podium or really, really give it their all through the whole event rather than kind of throwing the towel after their first loss. Because you find a lot of 2-day singles events, there's a lot of guys that cop a loss or two on the first day that they just don't show up for day two, you know, like because it's kind of like at that point I'm just wasting my time. You don't really see that in teams because one, you'd be kind of losing your weekend, but you also be letting your team down if you don't show up for day two.
And it's like it's
100%.
more accurate representation of how you go as a player within a group. Like we said,
Yeah,
how many
sure.
of you had a game where you like walk into it and you're like, I'm boned. Like he's going to shoot me off by turn 2, or like I just can't kill that unit, you know, which only, you know, steamrolls my army. It's like you have those matchups, but you approach the game so differently. Like you know you're going to lose, but you're fighting for every point you possibly can. So, like we're using a what do you call it? Sliding scale or a differential in this one. So essentially, it's like if I hold him to only 20 points more than me, that might only be him getting 15 points and me getting 5. 5 points in a 48-point win scenario with 3 other results to go in is huge. So it's like when you go out at the end of the round with a loss and everyone's like, how'd you go last round? You're like, oh, I lost. And it means that you're essentially out of the singles for winning first overall. But this one, you're like, I lost, but I got 5 points. Everyone's like, that's awesome because you basically got set in front of a freight train and you come out with 5 points. Like that shows like true grit and gives you a reward for your effort as a player. So like you can go away with like, yeah, you got a loss. We knew that was going to happen. The expectation isn't for you to win. The expectation is you to grit your teeth and get as much as you possibly can. And it's funny, like you play the underdog role a lot and you're like everyone gets in behind you. Like you come back with like got 4 points, everyone's like, yeah. Because it could be the difference, like Eric said. It's like, you know, some rounds it's like that's what you need. It comes down to a handful of points.
It truly is.
And I think,
Oh, sorry, Liam, you go.
oh no, I was just going to say, I mean, like the whole attitude shift of going from a singles event to a teams event. I mean, you guys have already said it, but I think, you know, by and large, you know, most competitive players, they like to win. I'm bloody guilty of that, you know, more than most, to be fair. But when you go to a teams event and you get absolutely run over by that freight train you mentioned, getting those couple of points and going back to your mates and being like, I got a point, this is the best, can actually be that overall difference for your whole team. And then, I mean, obviously playing 40K for a couple of years, I've been to a bunch of team events, and I always think about that team event down in Newcastle that they run. Those Newcastle team events are always a bunch of fun to go to.
Yep.
And in those events, you obviously always have, like when I've gone with my guys, I always think about how, you know, we always end up bussing someone and they go into a game that's so super hard for them. And when they come back and they say that they got a couple of points, you end up having a big hug and going to get lunch, and it's bloody awesome. And it's that completely different attitude to a singles event where you feel like you can't drop a point. You feel like you have to win every game. There's no exceptions. And obviously, like I actually find sometimes that the team events, they always introduce that extra strategic part of the game that is matchups. That's something that I think many players just haven't really done before by playing just singles events. And to be honest, I enjoy the matchup process and thinking about the matchup process almost more than playing the game itself. It's like a whole nother game. I think that's just a part on top that makes team events sort of the creme de la creme of 40K events.
I love that game.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You're bad.
Do you want to take us through the matchups of like what we're actually talking about with matchups? Because it is a team event. Like, how do we match each other? Like, who plays who? Because obviously in singles, it's all done off of, you know, winners play winners and rankings out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So in a teams event, it's completely different. Winners still play winners, but you got 4 people. Like, who plays each other?
Yeah.
Yep. So, do you want me to do this? Or?
Yeah, kick it away. Eric.
Yeah, far away.
All right. So basically, the 2 captains on either side. You got your 4-man lineup. Each captain will secretly note down their team champion for the round. So that comes into play towards the end of the pairings. Basically, straight up, the captains roll a dice each. The lowest rolling captain is going to put forward a list from his 3 leftovers, and then he's gonna hand that to the opposing captain. Then that bloke is going to pick from his 3 lists which one is going to play Captain A's put forward list. Then that bloke is going to pick a table to play on, and then you're going to do the same again, but starting with the guy who didn't put forward first. And then basically after you do those 2 matchups, you're going to have 2 lists left over. They're going to play each other, and then your 2 team champions are going to play each other as well.
But you get, let's say you're the list that's thrown up, you get to pick the table you play on too, yeah?
That's right.
So, I mean, you're kind of playing...
Sorry, mate.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's just it's sort of like it's a game within a game. So, yeah, you're thinking about what you're going to play, but you're also thinking about what you're going to play on what table. You might, put your horde list up and then somebody puts a gun line into it. But then if they pick a super dense table, if there happens to be one there, and all of your guns are completely useless, you might find that was a bad life decision.
Yeah.
And the other one is you can also use it to protect your mates as well. So if you Liam's been notorious for it. He's running in the past like a list. He's like, I don't care what table I'm on. It's just like you can turn around and go, well, I'll take that table because I don't want the elder player of my opposing team being able to pick it. You take that out of the equation. So we've got better tables for the rest of our boys after. Or it's like, oh, we don't want Planet Bowling Ball, for instance. It's like, well, my list doesn't care. So you take that out of the equation for the follow-up. Like it can get pretty in depth with like some of the strategies and stuff you can employ as a team for everything.
Yeah, and a lot of that also adds up into like part of the camaraderie that Eric was talking about, because you go, yeah, mate, I'm going to take this matchup for you so that you get a better matchup later. That comes into taking a red matchup or a bad matchup, or taking, Planet Bowling Ball and, getting steamrolled. Or if you don't care.
If I'm only going to get 3 points, I'm going to do it on a crappy table and make sure everyone else has a good round.
Exactly.
And that's it. You're going to take one for the team.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you're looking at a 4-man team lineup, and most teams before events like this, they get together or they have a chat over the net and they do like matchups. They have their own system and they rate what games are for them, so that the captains have an idea about how they think people will go in all of the games. And if you're going into a game and, for example, one of the standard systems people use is traffic lights. You say a game's green for good, yellow for average, and red for I'm going to get put in the bin. And if you're going into a red game, you're going to lose, but there's one table that's horrible for your team. You've not only taken a bad game, but if you also put yourself on the table nobody else wants, you've potentially helped your team more than your mate who's going to win big. You've potentially done a better service to your friends than the guy who's going to win all of his games. And that's huge. That's huge for how fun the events are.
I remember from Eric, when you led us through ATC that year, I remember you threw me into 4 reds?
That's it, mate.
4 reds, and I was like, oh, fuck you. And then I'd make a joke at the end of every pairings process. I'd be like, watch this. Walk away, come back. He's like, how many points do you get? 15. He's like, what? What?
You,
and then what's funny is the one green I got is the one red I got.
Yeah, you were Mr. Bus Stop, mate. Old Bus Stop.
But that's like, we asked at the start, it's like, why do we like team events and stuff like that? The biggest one for me, for someone who's been in the hobby for so long, is it's watching the development of other players. So it's like leading on, we're obviously, we've got 10 events potentially that could be team events next year on the cards, especially from us. And it's like a lot of guys try their hardest as a hallmark for their gaming career or competitive gaming career to be part of the Queensland team and representative, or the Australian team after that. And the team events, it's so hard in Queensland to actually pick an 8, where it's just like, with these, it's going to help us pick a lot more, I don't know, consistently, because we're having this sort of exposure to what these events are sort of like. This is like the top end competitive gaming, but all of us are like, that's never to be like shied away from. Like everyone thinks like we're all sweaty dudes, gaming on, and that's like the team events are the most relaxed, nicest atmosphere I've ever been in with gaming.
Yeah, 100%, man.
And it's like, and it's intense. Like, you're playing for trips overseas and, all that sort of stuff. And it's like all these guys are like on point, like as in some of the best gamers you'll ever see, worldwide. And it's like you get there and everyone's hugging, handshakes, patting each other on the back, like cheering each other on, tell them, don't worry, you'll get the next one, or fuck yeah, you did well, you got 4 points, it's amazing. It's like, it's really weird to be like, have games so intense, but the atmosphere really, really good.
That kind of comes from it simply just being like a team sport. I mean, whenever you look at things, I know obviously there's exception to rules, but when you look at singles sports, for example, those players have their own image and they can behave however they bloody well want, because it's not going to affect anyone but them. But if you have a team, especially if you're looking at the really big ticket team events like the WTC, when you're playing for argument's sake, Australia, how you communicate and how you behave represents everyone who plays the hobby in your country. And so there's this expectation on you, and you feel it. You want to be better. You want to play better, but you also want to be nicer. You want to represent how good the game can be, the best facets of competitive 40K. And I know we've spoken before on the podcast about sort of improving that competitive 40K experience. Part of that happens naturally with team events, because if somebody, if something happens or somebody misbehaves, or because there's bad sportsmanship, people will have a chat about it as a team. They'll say, hey, look, pull your head in, this is how you should behave. And that's how you grow over time. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about team events, because you will get that sort of community growth that you probably don't get by exclusively running singles events.
I think this is leading us into a segue a little bit. Like, the most development I've seen of medium to high level players come out of prep from team events. In the past, it's like, obviously this time we've imposed a sort of comp restriction, where we've went, like, everyone in this chat's been a representative player for Queensland or Australia. So it's like, if we just made a team, it wouldn't be very fair. And we all know the process. We've all been through it. We've all practiced it. So in this event, we inducted a rule where it's basically, if you've represented either Queensland or Australia in the last 2 years, you can only have maximum of 2 of those players on your team. Because, like, nothing worse than a 10-man team event. We have like 2 super teams, and then, like, not that everyone else is bad, it's just everyone else without that sort of expertise and knowledge. Like, we've talked a lot about not what the best list is for a team event. We've talked about matchups, attitudes, mental fortitude when you're approaching a loss, picking tables to help your team, like all these tactics and exposure to like those sorts of, things to help your team, nothing to do with lists. And it's like, if we don't share that or inject that into other teams, like, there is a bit of a disparity and gap between that. So we've basically went 2 players per team, and it gives the opportunity for that knowledge to spread out throughout the community as well.
Yeah, and even like saying that, so Eric, when we first started, Eric actually scouted a few of us newbie players along with one of the old boys from the scene, Simon, who's overseas currently, but he would scout us and be like, hey, do you guys want to come for some practice? We'll, play some games with you and we'll show you the way, how to do some things. And then that led into sort of team tournament practice. And at the time it was Denise and myself, and we got introduced to this process, and we just thought it was so cool. And Eric, do you want to give your opinions on this, because you're quite prominent in the sort of training 40K. You even host a coaching service yourself. What do you think about training people for team tournaments? Because that's something that you're doing currently with this new one.
Yeah, I think it's you got to take a very different perspective on playing the game altogether. It's very different to singles. Like you need to kind of make people understand that certain units you would normally consider bad might actually be a really great choice for a team event. That's because of how your team could be structured, what you think the meta is going to be, so you can kind of preemptively counter that. There's just a lot more that goes into it than kind of I'll just throw together a list of all the best units in the Marine Codex, right? Like it's you'd be taking really obscure choices. Even things like different relics and waller traits can make the world of difference. So it just takes a lot to kind of get someone to wrap their head around that and understand that it's not all about running the best unit in your codex. There's very different ways to build your list as well as very different ways to play. You don't always have to be like in a singles event. You're playing for the win, right? So like in a team event, if you're in a bad matchup, you aren't always going to be playing for the win. There might be no reason to, because it's just going to lead to a bigger loss. So you've got to kind of play so many games and go through so many different thought processes to get a player to understand that playing for a small loss off the bat will give a better result for you and your team.
It's better to secure 8 than risk it and get 2.
Exactly, or risk it and get 0, right? Like, 'cause that's realistic. Like that happens a lot. You overreach and you get smashed for it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Like,
there's
if you play
certain.
super caging defensively from the start, you're going to be racking up points.
So the other thing to note also with singles is the larger they go, the more undefeated you have. So, like you guys do a lot of stat center type stuff on this show. It's like you look at the lists that have won, the events and stuff. Sometimes that's one of like 5 to 6 to 20 in the LVO's case, undefeated lists. They went 8 rounds undefeated, but there's got to be one winner, and that's the one with the highest battle points. Usually, undefeated with the highest battle points. It doesn't necessarily mean, we'll talk old archetypes. So you got Double Spear Yanari, really good at getting high victory wins.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also had the 90 Plague Bearer list, or 120 or 180 Plague Bearer list. Like, they're two different facets of play where you go, they're both equally valuable in the team because one is used to going, like we talk about, getting thrown in front of a train or a truck or whatever the analogy is. Some lists take that a lot better. So it's like, I'm not in it for high wins. I'm in it for draws, small wins, and, small losses. So you design a very resilient, cagey list, and you play from that mentality from the get-go.
Sorry, Liam, but just something super important based on that is when you kind of get into playing a lot of those gritty games with new people, some players are actually really good at playing in that way, like super defensively, not really overreaching for wins. And in a singles event, like if you were just picking a team based on results from singles events, a lot of those players might get overlooked because they don't perform so well in a singles environment because they don't run lists that are going to get huge wins. Whereas if you kind of open yourself up to kind of see how they play and really take it in and understand their thought process, you might find they're really good at filling a gap in a team. And you need players like that. A team can't function with 8 players that just are there to smash face because it's not going to work. You need guys who can play under high pressure and get those points in hard game.
Is that why you kept throwing me into reds, Eric?
I was testing you, mate. I was testing
You're a diamond, mate. You thrive in high pressure.
I mean, you kind of, to be honest, stole my thought there in many ways, and it's interesting because not just with play styles, but with list design as well. If you look at building a list for singles, as you said already, you're going to go, and if you're truly playing to win in a singles event and you're truly doing everything in your power with your unlimited plastic crack budget to win a 40k event, you're going to pick the best book objectively, and then you're going to try and fill your list with the best units that synergize in the best possible way and suit you the best. But if you're going to a teams event, not only does the teams event force you to diversify more, which is another awesome thing about it, because in this format, I actually don't know if we mentioned it before, but of course, like all teams events, you can only use one codex once. So this means that rather than the meta, as I've seen in some events over in the United States, being even as high as 65% Adeptus Astartes codexes, at maximum you can have 25%. You're never going to get more than that in a 4-man teams event, because you can only have the Codex Space Marines once in a 4-man team event. And this means that you're obviously forced to diversify the armies that you bring. But even more than that, as Eric said, there are sort of archetypes of players that thrive, heck, are born in a team's environment. You have those players who are used to losing games, but are masters of only bleeding 1 or 2 or 3 points. And these are players, I've heard called shields or other sorts of players. And they're essentially integral to a team's event, because without them, every loss you have is going to be big. And that's why these players might go to a team event. And I mean, when I went to Newcastle, there were guys on my team that did that lost all 5 of their games. But those losses were so small that it meant that the other wins actually mattered proportionately more. Those sort of players are probably not going to go and win the LVO. They're not going to go and win CanCon. But they're essentially some of the most important assets you can have for a team. And that simple fact that you diversify the game so much made me fall in love with team events at the very first one I ever went to. It was awesome.
It's also good because personalities come out in team events as well. Like when you're getting up to, it's like, it's round 8, day 3, if we ever return back to that sort of format, it's like, who's on the team that's just like, come on boys, energy up, like have some trail mix, like, you have those sorts of guys, like
have a banana.
Yeah, exactly. Like, make sure you drink your water, like, and it gives a lot of people, you can see like different personality types that make a good team as well. Like you do have the fully organized guys, you've got the morale sort of guys, like the comforters, and then you got the maniacs as well that are just out there like full energy all the time. But yeah, like it's amazing to see the diversity in what your factions can actually do. Like we all know there's codex creep. Like the game wouldn't exist without it because they got to drive sales. I'm like, that's not a negative point, but there's a reason why Marines are good, because they, 30 different factions potentially. If you look at the breakup of every single Marine, like there's only, I think, 20 odd factions overall, but it's like, was it 30 odd factions, but 20 of them are Marines? Like it's something ridiculous like that. Like if you actually include, there's more Marines per half, I think it is. I'm rambling. But essentially it's, like, if you take out all the Marine supplets and stuff like that, you don't see a lot of diversity, in stuff. But like all of a sudden, we've got Dark Elder coming, and we, the last event that I ran was like 1%, of list. Do you want to go into the percentages of factions?
Yeah, we'll hit
that. That is a solid segue.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so like Liam talked about, it was 65%. I think the last one, which was Oktoberfest from QGG, Marines were sitting around about the 50% mark. So in our team events, the highest faction at 11.4% is actually Necrons. So new army, but in a team event, highly resilient, very good at playing the mission army. It makes sense that it's 11.4. Mm-hmm. Your Astartes are 9.1, so they're less than 10% of the field. So even though every team can have 1, which would equate to 25%, we're sitting at only 9% for Space Marines. So less than half the teams have Space Marines in them.
That's so different to like what you'd initially expect.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Custodes, 9.1. And Adeptus Mechanicus, 9.1. So Custodes and Mechanicus, it's like those sort of gritty, real resilient armies that we were talking about that you need are actually making up a large percentage. And then I think Eric made swords, or someone made mention of the swords. So things like the Chaos Demons are sitting at 6%. Death Guard, by their own faction, 6%, another resilient type list. Grey Knights, 6.8. Orcs at 6.8.
Yeah.
Adeptus Sororitas are making up just shy of 5%. So there's a couple of them.
Yeah.
And then we got a few little Marine factions because I don't think it's been updated, but we've got Blood Angels and Dark Angels making up 5%. Harlequins, we've got 5%. Chaos is 5%. Astra Militarum is one list, so it's like 2.5, Drakari 2.5, Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, and then T-Suns are all, and Tyranids. So these are all like one list out of all of them. They're all at 2.5%. Still a 50% Imperium, but Imperium's just gotten all the love over the last like year and a half, so it's not surprising. But yeah, like much better when you go, if you're going to play hard games all weekend, it's like, how many Marine players do I have to beat to get to the top? Whereas like in a team event, we're always sitting at like, it's roughly about 10% each faction, or like, you know, your top 1 through to 6 factions, they're only 10% representation. So you get a lot more, you don't have to play the same faction all the time. Like the more, you know, you could be playing, you know, the Chaos Knight list once, and then you'd be switching over to Death Guard, and then you get a Custode list. Like the variety of your games in a team event will vary dramatically.
Well, actually, interestingly, I think so. There's 10 teams at this event. I think the stats are a little bit devious here because there's 4 Astartes players, 2 Blood Angels, 2 Dark Angels. So that overall,
yeah,
Marines...
I think they're, because there's a double up in 2 of the teams. Something's went wrong, and they've done a double submission. So I've got to go back and find out how they've done it and delete one of them out.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but I know the Dark Angel and the Blood Angel player, and they're on the teams with, they've got 6 entries for a 4-man team. So I've got to delete that out.
Oh, padding the stats, huh?
Yeah, I know.
Sounds like something Eric would do.
Man, my 4-man team is going to really struggle to beat a 6-man team. That's going to be hard.
Who's the water boy on the side?
Coach.
Coach.
So,
do you guys want to talk about that as well? Like, because that's actually a thing.
Coaches.
Yeah,
coaches and you know, every other support team member that we have.
Yeah, and
heck, I asked to bring one.
I'm an orange boy for the weekend.
Yeah, so this is a format where it's like quite acceptable because there's so much that goes on with team events as well. Like like we said, it's a game within a game with the matchups. So, but it's really cool. Like a lot of teams, especially the European teams and stuff like that, they employ people that will go to Europe, not play, because they're a coach. So the coach will help you play your games in the lead up to the event and all that sort of stuff. Help you with the matchups, team list design, like not just your individual list design, but how the makeup of the team looks. Like we're talking about, we need people that can take a few, pan into the face. We need other guys to go and do the scalpel wins. And it's just like the coach on the day. Eric will probably and Liam will probably attest to this better. What's the coach's sort of role on the day?
Eric and I both went to ETC back before its name change in 2019, and when I was there, Josh Diffie from Victoria was our coach, and I would argue that in many ways he was the most important member of that team. And I'm not just talking about in like pre-event prep, but on the day. The coach kind of does a number of things, not just for team morale, but sort of assisting the team. I mean, for the event being run this Saturday, as a 4-man team's run in sort of a more casual setting, there is kind of like an etiquette standard. But for those really, really big events, there is kind of like a step up in what's expected of you, sort of in that kind of gentleman gamer kind of facet. And part of that is, for example, you can't talk to each other. You can't help your mates out in games because that's considered colluding, and you could argue that that's cheating. You're playing one opponent, not 2 or not 3. But the coach sort of allows you, he is not playing a game. He can come over and sort of be like, hey, your mate down at the end of the hall is about to have a big loss. I need you to conserve as many points as you can. And, you often see in those sports movies where, the coach will say I'm thinking about those American movies where people play baseball. You always see the coach be like, we need like a spin ball or a fast ball. This is what's going to win us the game. The coach does that for 40K events. They go, hey, we need you to score big here. We need you to do that fast ball. Or, no, don't take any risks. We just need a small win. That's going to secure the overall round.
Yeah.
The coach is essentially there to make the team cohesive. They're not there to be a water boy. As much as many jokes can be had, The coach is actually just as important as the players.
They center you like mid-round.
Mm-hmm. So, Eric, you were coach in our 2018 ATC. What are your opinions on the coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different for what I was doing because I didn't come over with you blokes. But I mean, the coach is in a 40k team is very different to a coach in a sporting team, right? Normally, the coach is the one like leading the show. He's instructing the team, all that sort of jazz. The coach is more of like a support element to the team in a 40k team. So Liam pretty much nailed it. I think like having a guy to be able to give you that inside information on how the boys are doing throughout a round when you can't really afford to leave your table is that information is super valuable. Like knowing if you need to really push that extra mile to get all the points you can, or if you can let the foot off the gas is super important to know. And not just for a points perspective. Like obviously trying to grind out big wins is it's a lot of energy that goes into playing a high stress 40k game. So if you know you can kind of let your foot off the gas, you can really save a fair bit of energy when you're going into like a digging further into an 8-round event. That sort of stuff is all super relevant.
And that's extremely unique teams events, right? Because in a singles event, especially like something like LVO, you mentioned it before, Josh, where the winner of LVO is not the one dude who goes undefeated. It's the dude who goes undefeated and gets every scrap of battle points that he possibly can.
Yep.
But in a team event, because objectively, even though you might have hundreds of players, you have much fewer teams overall. By and large, the victory goes to the team with the most round points, especially in the bigger events that have 6 rounds like ETC did.
Yep.
Because of that, like Eric said, if you know your team's going to win, you don't have to pin every Gretchen and make every 9-inch charge and do all this jazz to try and scrape individual points from somebody you're already going to beat or lose to, because you know the outcomes for certain. And I think that also builds that sort of friendly camaraderie in team events, because you and your opponent, I mean, I experienced this in a number of my rounds over there. You and your opponent, especially if you're some of the last people playing, the outcome of the round is sort of already determined. And so part of that means that I can either, relax, or I can either ramp it up. If you know that your game's going to be the decider, it sort of adds that extra pressure that some players actually thrive on, some players love. But win or lose, you and your opponent know that you're not the only reason your team won or lost. There are 3 others, 5 others, 7 other players on the team that made just as much impact as you. You can't say they didn't. You could only all score the same number of points. So I think it's just some of the coolest. I think it is the coolest way to play 40k by a big margin.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this event will kind of be that, I think I'm going to call it a premiere event, Josh, because it's your sort of the first event under this new heading that you're running, and it's going to be teams. You've already given us a bit of an overview about what 2021 is going to hold for Gladiator Games and Art of War, and also the normal blokes being involved with you. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on the team event?
Probably the biggest one's thanking my sponsors. So with this one, Art of War has come on, and they've donated some of their pads or booklets to us. If you guys haven't seen them, go over to the Art of War page and check them out. They're a very, very good tool to help you record your games. It obviously has all your primary, secondaries, and all that sort of stuff. Battle Station up here in Toowoomba has come along and given us a swath of stuff. Like I'm giving out full-based army sets from Gamers Grass and stuff like that. If you've ever seen them, they're the pre-made, pre-painted bases sets that you can just buy.
They're amazing too.
Yep, so I've got 2 full armies worth to give out to 2 lucky people. I've got a lot of the... I'll open the box right now because it's sitting right next to me. So I've got books, I've got dice trays, I've got dice bags, I've got customized dice, I've got...
But wait, there's more.
Those things that you put your paints in, so you're not a pleb like me and spill it all over your desk. Yeah. So I've got a couple of them. I've got some holders that can double as anything you really want them to. We've got some brush cleaner. We have some books. we have plenty of other static grass applicators, a few of the wet pellets from Army Painter because they redid their line. I've got some Iwata airbrush cleaning kits as well. So, yeah, heaps and heaps of swag. I'm coming online as well under Gladiator Gaming. I'm launching into pretty much basing materials and any sort of scenic type stuff. So I'll have like link chain, barbed wire, rebar strips, flocking material, slate, sand, grass, you name it. My brand will be Gladiator Gaming for that as well. But it's basically I'll be donating a fair chunk of stuff as well to you guys. But yeah, so pretty much Battle Station, Art of War, and myself for sponsors for this event.
Mate, is your
He's
name
even-
Josh or Houdini?
Houdini, yes.
He's even giving away a 2011 Mazda 3. It's true.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's a more favour to me than you guys, though.
I definitely just dropped some paint onto my hand, so that was why I went a bit quiet there for a sec.
If you come to my event, I could help you with that.
Yeah, he just advertised paint holders, Liam. Come on.
Get on it.
I'm pretty sure nothing I do counts as paint.
So there's one thing I wanted to cover as well. So Eric, Art of War is now streaming. So do you want to tell us a bit more about that? Because I think this is a big deal coming out from the Art of War team.
Yeah, that's it, mate. So we got Big Nick Standing leading the charge for Queensland doing the streaming with Art of War.
Mm-hmm.
He's hopefully going to be joined by Adam on the weekend.
Yep.
And Mr. Luke right here. We're doing a bit of a collab with Normal Blokes for our streaming.
Yep, I'm excited.
We're looking to be throwing hopefully 4 tables on stream. The top 2 teams playing each other, all 4 tables on camera. Pretty keen for all that stuff.
That'll be awesome.
I think it adds a bit of prestige to all your 40k events. I don't think after going to an event with a stream, I don't think playing in one without it was quite the same, to be honest.
I definitely agree. It adds that
100%.
hype, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you walk in, you're like, oh, this feels a bit more professional, you know.
For sure. So yeah, and we've got Diff remote in. So any technical issues we have on the day, we'll be able to have Mr. IT man himself.
Hopefully.
We might be in trouble with that one, mate. It's his anniversary.
Oh,
Ooh. Now that's commitment to the hobby right there.
I'm pretty good with pen and paper, don't you worry.
Hey, Luke, as the man in here not playing, watching from the sidelines, who's your money on, mate?
Oh, are we doing dream teams? Is this a thing? Is this on for this one?
Slap a 50 down, mate. Come on.
Oh, here we go. All right, I'm gonna randomly pick the coolest name I see. All right.
Gee, he's diplomatic.
I'm liking the art of milk so far. That's led by fuck. What's his nickname, Eric?
Nah, it's
Humble Claw.
Humble Claw, Proud Plume, Humble Claw, something like that.
Oh, so
Big Ray.
Who's your money on, Eric?
Oh, mate. Daddy's girls.
I was about to say the same thing. I could pick it a mile away.
What champions?
But see that that's what I like though. Like obviously, you know, I submitted my list ages ago, but you're going through it and you're like, I don't know what it was like, but you go through these lists obviously because I marked them all today and whatnot, and it's just like, you know, the players on the team, so you're like, oh, that one's dangerous because of this player and that player, you know, and we've got some elements to say, but like, you're not really looking at the good players on the team. You're looking at like the other ones because we've split the reps up, and you're like, oh, geez, that person that hasn't really rep before, like I've watched them play, and they got this tenacity or you know all that sort of stuff. So like, it's really cool. I don't actually know who's going to win it on the weekend, which is nice. Like, you know, I think every team's really in with a shot because there's going to be some upsets.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Like,
see, every team has, you know, two ex represented players or at least, and then 2 newcomers that are possibly being trained by them as well. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and that's a good thing as well, because like Queensland's been going really good over the last couple of years with its training development of its players. Like we had a rep team for one of the last ATC team where so basically Queensland picked its top 8, and because we were hosting it, we had to put in a Merc team, and that Merc team ended up coming 4th overall. So it's like not, we'll call it not the selected, still, pretty much come midfield.
Yeah, second
Like,
tier.
yeah, it's like that's amazing for a guy of because obviously like we've just talked about, you're picking this guy for this attribute, this guy for this attribute, and then the Merc team was formed, similar process, but it's like the field was sort of picked clean a little bit, but they still managed, because the caliber of gaming in Queensland's so high, still managed to put on a really good show, and they almost came 3rd. Like that was the awesome thing about it, and like that's attributed to a lot of people, throughout the history of 40k in Queensland. But that's what team events does. It's sort of guys get taken under the wing a lot, and they get grown pretty much professionally, like as in from a gaming perspective. And yeah, like I'm excited because there's a lot of teams in here where there's a lot of names where I'm like, that's a good mix of people in that team. Like regardless of what they're playing or if they've repped before or whatnot, I'm like, I can see those 4 blokes, and I'm like, that's going to be a good team, because you got the personality traits of the players in there as well. Like, it's like, when you go, I'm going to verse this team, for instance, like that's going to be gritty. Like some of those players are used to really, taking it to the limits. Not in a bad way, but like as in they won't give up points easily, stuff like that. So what do you reckon, Liam?
Well, I mean, look, you're talking to a plastic crack act through and through. So, I mean, I love it, and I love tournaments in general. But I mean, the one thing that I'll say is that I'd only played tournaments for a very short amount of time before I was involved in that ATC back in, was it 2017 or 2018? I think it was 2018 over in Perth in Western Australia. That was sort of my first significant team event. And it was essentially the day after I got back. I think I was speaking to Elliot, Eric, my bad, or a few of my mates, and I said that quite literally, this was the most amazing 40k event I've ever been to. I'm so addicted right now. I want to play another one in like a week's time. Yeah. And I think that events like this on a smaller scale, run more regularly, make that accessible to more people. Yeah. And I'm so keen for my team to be. I'm playing with Ben, Zach, and Brent. Zach and Brent have never played team events before. In fact, Zach's only been playing 40k for a very short amount of time. And I really, really hope that after this event, they leave with that same fire that I had, that same amount of fun that I had at ATC. And they say, hey, look, next time you're playing a teams event, please bring us along, because I really want to play those awesome events. That's what I'm really hoping to get out of this weekend. And I hope that many other teams experience the same thing.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, on that bombshell, we have actually been talking for a little while, fellas, so we might call that a night.
All right. Thanks, Geeze, for having us.
Sounds good.
Easy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on.
One last thing, if that's all right.
Yep. Go ahead, Eric.
So one of the Art of War sponsors, Knights of Dice, is an Aussie company. Our mate Viv down in Victoria. He's going to be running a bit of a promotion that seems to be long term. So just check out his website, guys. Knights of Dice. When you go to purchase, if you enter into the discount code Art of War, no spaces or capitals, you get yourself a 15% discount. So we use him for our terrain. You'll see that on the stream this weekend. As well as all our carry cases for the Art of War lads. So we all love his gear. Check it out.
That's awesome. And some shameless self-promotion from me too. If you like what you've listened to today and want to listen to more, check us out on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And we've recently transitioned into YouTube as well. So hit us up, listen more, and if you have any feedback, pop us a message.